The galaxy was full of stories. Some were about great wars, others about lost civilizations, and some were just myths told from one generation to the next. Among the most mysterious of these stories was the tale of humanity. 20,000 years ago, the humans were said to be strong, curious, and full of fire. They built ships that could cross the stars faster than anyone else. They made weapons that frightened entire empires. They explored worlds others thought impossible to reach. But one day they disappeared. No one knew why. Some said they destroyed themselves. Others believed they left the galaxy forever. With the passing of time, the humans became only a whisper, a legend told to children. No one thought they would ever return. Captain Arian of the Veylan Alliance never believed much in myths. He was a careful man, one who studied facts and trusted scanners more than old stories. He had spent years working in the patrol fleets of the outer sectors, keeping trade routes safe from pirates and unknown dangers. To him, humans were just another story meant to impress people at gatherings. But one quiet cycle, his scanners showed something he had never seen before. A massive object was moving slowly at the edge of charted space. It was not a planet, not an asteroid, and not any kind of ship used by known races. Its structure was old, very old, but somehow intact. It drifted in silence with no clear energy signature. Yet there was no doubt it was a ship. The news spread quickly. The Council of the Alliance was alerted. Scholars, scientists, and even rival empires sent messages demanding information. Could it be a weapon? Could it be a lost colony? Or worse, could it be a trap? The Council decided to send an escort fleet to investigate. They did not want to risk panic, but they also could not ignore what had been found. Captain Arian was chosen to guide the mission because of his reputation for caution. He was not a man who rushed into danger, and the Council wanted someone who would study the situation with care. The fleet traveled slowly across the dark stretches of space until the ship came into view. It was massive, larger than any modern cruiser. Its surface was scarred and covered with strange markings. The hull bore lines and designs that no alien race recognized. As the escorts approached, they saw faint glows along its structure, like tiny lights struggling to stay alive after thousands of years. No one spoke at first. The silence of the moment was heavy, as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath. Among the Council's chosen specialists was Dr. Claire Morgan. She was an Earth historian, one of the few whose family carried down stories of humanity's old journey into the stars. While most thought of humans as myths, Claire believed they had once been real. She studied every fragment, every piece of writing, every old star map that mentioned them. When she saw the ship on the scanners, her heart raced. To her, there was no doubt this was a human vessel. She whispered to herself as the name on the ship came into focus, Eternity's Light. It was written in English, a language she had spent her life studying. None of the aliens around her understood what it said, but Claire did. She knew in that instant that the legends were true. Boarding the ship was a task filled with fear and excitement. The Council ordered strict rules. No weapons were to be fired, no sudden actions were to be taken. The boarding team moved carefully through the vast corridors of the ship. The air was cold and still, yet breathable. Dust floated in the beams of their lights. The design was unlike anything they had seen before. It was both simple and complex, with smooth walls and strange panels that hummed faintly. The deeper they went, the more they realized the ship was not empty. They found chambers filled with glass tubes, lined up in rows that stretched farther than the eye could see. Inside each tube was a person, humans, men and women who looked as if they were only sleeping. Their faces were calm, their bodies unchanged by time. The chambers glowed faintly, powered by systems that had survived for 20,000 years. The boarding team froze, unable to believe what they were seeing. Aliens who had mocked the old legends now stood silent, humbled by the truth. Dr. Claire Morgan stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she touched the glass of one chamber. The man inside looked strong, his features sharp but peaceful. His hair floated slightly in the fluid, his chest rising and falling slowly. Claire's eyes filled with tears. She had spent her life searching for proof, and now it was here before her. She placed her hand against the glass, whispering words no one else understood. And then, to the shock of everyone, the man stirred. The lights around the chamber brightened. The hum of the systems grew louder. Slowly, the man's eyes opened. They were clear and piercing, filled with strength even after millennia of sleep. His gaze met Claire's, and for a moment the entire room felt as if time itself had stopped. The man pressed his hand against the glass, mirroring her touch. Then the chamber opened with a hiss of air. He stepped forward, weak but standing tall. His voice was quiet, almost hoarse, but it carried across the chamber with undeniable power. His name, he said, was Daniel Brooks, commander of the Eternity's Light. The aliens watched in stunned silence. A human, alive and awake, stood before them. The myths had become reality. Humanity had returned, not as whispers or shadows, but in flesh and blood. Daniel's eyes moved across the room, studying the strange faces of the alien visitors. When his gaze settled on Claire, he gave the faintest nod as if recognizing something familiar. The silence stretched, broken only by the steady hum of the ancient ship. For the first time in 20,000 years, a human voice echoed among the stars again, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The news of Daniel Brooks' waking spread quickly across the fleet. Aliens who had once laughed at the myths of humans now stood uneasy, unsure of what this meant. For 20,000 years, humanity had been silent, their memory fading into legend. And now here was a man, a commander of a ship older than their own empires, standing alive before them. Every detail was recorded, every word spoken carefully written down. The council demanded reports, the scientists rushed with questions, and the soldiers whispered in fear and awe. Daniel himself was calm, though his body was weak after so long in sleep. Claire stayed near him, guiding him gently, helping him understand the strange mix of species around him. She explained to him the basics, the year, the current structure of the Galactic Council, and how humanity had been forgotten. He listened in silence, his eyes sharp though his movements were slow. He did not argue, he did not panic, but his quietness carried a weight that unsettled even the most confident members of the boarding crew. The Council's representatives requested to speak with Daniel directly. Captain Arian, cautious as always, insisted the meeting be held inside the Eternity's Light, where the humans still lay sleeping in their cryogenic chambers. A chamber was cleared, with long tables and chairs brought in by the boarding team. The alien officials, tall and proud in their robes, waited nervously as Daniel entered. He walked slowly but with dignity, his steps steady, his presence commanding attention without force. Claire stayed beside him, translating when needed, though Daniel seemed to understand more than they expected. One of the officials, a proud, silver-skinned leader of the Zalar Dominion, spoke first. He asked Daniel why the humans had vanished. Why had they left the galaxy silent? Why had they abandoned the stars? The question was sharp, almost accusing, as if he feared the truth. Daniel looked at him for a long moment, then spoke. His voice was quiet but strong, carrying across the chamber. He explained that humanity had not left by choice. They had been forced into silence by war, a war with an enemy so dangerous that it threatened not just humans but every race in the galaxy. The Eternity's Light was one of many seed ships meant to survive, to wait, and to return when the time was right. The room fell silent. For 20,000 years, no one had seen such an enemy. The council officials exchanged glances, uncertain if they should believe. Some whispered that Daniel was lying, that humans were playing a trick. Others looked uneasy, remembering reports from distant colonies that had recently gone dark. Daniel, seeing their doubt, said no more. He only told them that the awakening of his ship was not by chance. Something had triggered it. The enemy was moving again. Claire believed him completely. Her studies had shown fragments of records, hints of battles so ancient they were thought to be fantasy. But standing beside Daniel, she felt the truth in his words. She spoke up, telling the council that if they ignored this warning, they might repeat history. Captain Arian, too, though cautious, admitted that his instincts told him this was no lie. The old ship, the ancient crew, and the calm authority of Daniel Brooks were too real to dismiss. After the meeting, Claire walked with Daniel through the silent halls of the Eternity's Light. The walls hummed faintly as systems long asleep began to stir. Lights flickered, engines groaned deep within the ship, and for the first time in ages the vessel felt alive again. Daniel touched the walls as if greeting an old friend. He explained to Claire that the ship was more than metal and engines. It was built to endure, to protect, and to wait. Every chamber, every system had been designed with patience for this very moment. They stopped by one of the cryogenic rows where hundreds of humans still slept. Daniel placed his hand on the glass of one chamber, looking at a young woman preserved inside. His face softened. He told Claire her name was Ellen, one of his officers, a brilliant strategist. Claire asked him if he would wake them all, but Daniel shook his head. Not yet, he said. The world they would wake into was strange and fragile. They needed to prepare first. Too many humans waking too quickly could cause chaos, not just for the ship, but for the galaxy now watching. Meanwhile, the news of humans returning spread beyond the Council fleets. Across empires, people argued. Some feared the humans, remembering the old stories of their power. Others hoped for their strength, believing they might protect the galaxy from unknown dangers. Old rivalries deepened. The Zalar Dominion demanded the ship be seized and controlled by the Council. The Myran Collective argued that the humans should be free to act as they chose, since they had built their own future long before others. Tensions grew, but no one dared to move against the Eternity's light directly. Its presence alone inspired both fear and respect. On the ship, Daniel began exploring the control centers, slowly reviving parts of the system. Claire followed him, recording everything, asking questions. She wanted to understand what had truly happened all those centuries ago. Daniel explained what little he could. Humanity had fought an enemy not of this galaxy, a force that consumed worlds and fed on life itself. It had taken everything humans had to hold them back, but instead of risking the destruction of all, humanity chose silence. They withdrew, sending their seed ships across the stars, hidden in the dark, waiting for signs the enemy would return. And now, after 20,000 years, the ship had awoken. Claire asked him if humanity had won the war back then. Daniel's eyes grew distant. He said they had survived, but at a cost so great it had shattered their spirit. Entire fleets lost, billions gone, worlds destroyed. Humanity had chosen to vanish, to heal in silence. But now the healing was over. The awakening meant the enemy stirred again. That night, in the observation chamber, Claire stood looking at the stars. Daniel joined her, silent at first. Then he told her something that sent chills down her spine. The Eternity's light was not the only ship. Others had been sent, scattered across the galaxy, hidden in places no one had reached. If this ship had awoken, it was likely others would follow. Humanity was not just returning with one vessel. They were returning with many. Far from the fleet, reports began to arrive. A mining colony on the outer rim had gone silent. Patrols sent to investigate found only ruins, burned and broken, as if something had swallowed the life from the world. The Council tried to keep the news secret, but whispers spread quickly. Daniel listened to the report without surprise. He told Claire this was only the beginning. The enemy had come back. The galaxy was not ready, but humanity was. The Council was forced to debate quickly. Some argued for closing borders and defending their own worlds. Others wanted to destroy the Eternity's light before humans could rise again. But a few, those who had seen the destruction firsthand, began to believe that humanity's return was not a curse but a chance. Daniel, standing before them once more, promised nothing. He only said one truth. Humanity had been silent for 20,000 years, but their silence had ended. And now the galaxy must choose whether to stand with them or to face the darkness alone. The halls of the Eternity's light grew brighter with each passing day. Systems that had been silent for thousands of years began to hum softly. Lights flickered to life. Doors that had once been sealed opened with smooth precision, and the great engines deep inside the vessel whispered like a giant waking from a long sleep. The aliens who had boarded to study the ship now walked carefully, their voices lowered as if they were inside something holy. To them, it was more than a ship. It was proof that myths could breathe. Daniel Brooks spent his hours walking the ship with Claire Morgan. Though weak at first, his strength slowly returned. He carried himself with the steady bearing of someone used to command, someone who knew what it meant to make decisions that carried heavy weight. Claire often asked questions about the past, eager to understand what had truly happened. Daniel spoke only when he felt the need, his words measured, but when he did speak, his voice carried truth that no one could ignore. He explained that humanity had not vanished into silence by choice. They had fought an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. It was not an empire, not a people who wanted power, but a force that consumed life itself. Worlds were stripped of all energy, all growth, left as cold husks. Ships had been torn apart as if they were nothing. Humanity, proud and stubborn, had resisted. They had built fleets beyond measure, weapons that pushed science to its limits, and still the enemy endured. The only way to survive had been to disappear, to retreat into silence, and to wait. The Eternity's light had been one of hundreds of seed ships, each carrying people, knowledge, and history, hidden across the stars until the right moment. Claire listened with wide eyes. She had studied fragments of old records, but hearing it from Daniel himself was different. It was no longer just theory. It was real. She asked him if humanity had truly believed they could hide forever. Daniel shook his head. He told her humanity knew the silence would end one day. The seed ships had been programmed to wake when signs of the enemy returned. That time had come. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was restless. Reports arrived daily of colonies at the edges of space being destroyed. Patrol fleets were lost without a trace. Some still doubted Daniel's warnings, but fear grew stronger than doubt. Arguments broke out between empires. The Zalar Dominion demanded the Eternity's light be placed under council control. The Myron Collective argued that humanity must be left to command their own destiny. Smaller powers whispered of leaving the council entirely, afraid that war was coming. Captain Arian, though cautious, began to respect Daniel. He saw in him not just a survivor of the past, but a leader prepared for the present. Arian told his officers that the galaxy was changing, whether they wanted it or not. Humanity's return was not something they could stop. It was something they had to face. Daniel himself spent more time in the control centers of the ship. With Claire beside him, he reactivated consoles covered in dust. Holographic maps filled the air, showing ancient star routes, long-lost human colonies, and hidden storage worlds. Claire gasped when she saw the scale of it. Humanity had once spread farther than anyone alive could imagine. But what shocked her most was Daniel's quiet statement. Not all seed ships had been lost. Some would be waking soon. Humanity's silence was breaking not in one place, but in many. One evening, Daniel stood in the observation deck looking at the stars. Claire joined him. He told her that when he closed his eyes, he could still remember the old war. The screams of ships breaking apart, the emptiness of dead worlds, the silence of victory that felt more like defeat. He carried those memories not as wounds, but as warnings. He said humanity had paid a price no one else should pay again. Claire placed her hand gently on his arm, telling him the galaxy needed those memories now, needed someone who remembered what was coming. The first true test came sooner than expected. A distress call reached the fleet. A border colony was under attack, the council argued, unwilling to send ships so far from their core worlds. But Daniel insisted on going. He told them the Eternity's light had not awakened by chance. It had a purpose. Captain Arian agreed, against his own instincts, and the fleet set course for the colony. When they arrived, the sight chilled them all. The colony was burning. Its surface was scarred with black lines as if something had drained the very life from the ground. Strange ships moved above it, sleek and twisted, unlike anything the council had ever seen. They moved like predators, striking at the colony's defenses with merciless precision. For the first time in thousands of years, Daniel saw the enemy again. His face hardened, not with fear, but with grim recognition. The council escorts were brave, but their weapons barely scratched the enemy. Panic spread across their comms as ships began to fall. Daniel turned to Claire, his eyes sharp. He told her this was what humanity had prepared for. Then he gave orders to his crew, though most of them still slept. The ship itself responded. Systems that had been quiet for ages roared to life. Weapon banks glowed with energy, shields unfolded like wings of light, and the great engines pushed the ship forward with power that stunned the council fleets. The Eternity's light entered the battle. Its weapons struck with precision, tearing through the enemy ships with force no one thought possible. Daniel guided the vessel as if it were an extension of himself. The alien crews watched in awe as the human ship fought not like a relic, but like a predator returned to its hunting ground. The enemy reeled, retreating into the darkness, leaving behind the ruined colony but unable to destroy the fleet. When the battle was over, silence fell across the comms. The council fleets had lost many, but they had survived because of the human ship. The colony lay in ruins, but survivors were pulled from the wreckage. Claire watched Daniel closely. He did not celebrate, did not smile. His eyes were distant, remembering too much. She asked him quietly if this was the beginning. He nodded once. Humanity's silence was over, but the war was only starting again. News of the battle spread across the galaxy. Empires that had doubted now saw proof. Humanity had returned, and their power was real. Some cheered, others trembled, but no one ignored it. Whispers grew louder. If the enemy had come back, perhaps only humanity could stand against them. Yet in hidden chambers, rulers plotted. They feared that if humanity rose again, The balance of power would shift forever. On the eternity's light, Daniel stood before the rows of cryogenic chambers. He looked at his sleeping crew, men and women who had trusted him to lead them across the centuries. He whispered that their time was coming, that soon they would rise and fight once more. Claire watched from behind, knowing she was witnessing the return of something the galaxy had long forgotten. The myths were gone. The humans were real, and with them came a storm the stars would never forget. The battle at the colony left a heavy mark on everyone who witnessed it. The Council fleets had suffered losses, the colony had been torn apart, and yet the enemy had been pushed back by the return of the eternity's light. Across the galaxy, the story spread like fire. Old myths had become truth, and the name of humanity was once again on every tongue. For some, it was a promise of hope. For others, it was a shadow of fear. On board the Eternity's Light, Daniel Brooks stood quietly in the command chamber, his hands resting against the glowing panels. Around him, ancient systems that had slept for 20,000 years were alive again. The hum of energy filled the air, and the walls glowed softly with power. He did not smile or boast. His face remained calm, but inside his mind he was already planning. The enemy had returned, and this was only the beginning. Claire Morgan stayed near him, watching every detail. She was still filled with wonder at the ship, but also with worry. The sight of the ruined colony haunted her. She could not stop thinking about the people who had screamed as the enemy's fire consumed their homes. She asked Daniel if this was how it had been before, during the ancient war. Daniel's eyes grew dark as he nodded. He told her this was only a small taste of what was to come. The true enemy was far stronger, far more dangerous. What they had seen was only a scouting force. The council, shaken by the battle, called for another meeting. Delegates from every empire gathered, their faces tense. Some demanded immediate action, calling for fleets to join together under one command. Others refused, afraid that their own worlds would be left defenseless. And many looked at the humans with suspicion, whispering that perhaps the return of humanity itself had triggered the enemy's rise. Captain Arian tried to calm the storm, but his voice was lost among the noise. When Daniel entered the chamber, silence fell. He walked slowly, his presence alone commanding attention. He listened as the delegates argued, then spoke with steady words. He told them humanity had not brought the enemy back. The enemy had always been waiting. Their hunger was endless, and sooner or later they would have struck again. The only choice now was to face them together or fall one by one. His words carried weight, but still, doubt lingered in many hearts. After the meeting, the Zalar Dominion made their position clear. They would not allow the Eternity's Light to move freely. They demanded the ship be placed under council authority. Daniel refused without raising his voice. He simply told them that humanity had fought this war before and survived when no one else could. His ship, his crew, and his people would not serve as tools for others. They would fight as they always had on their own terms. This caused uproar. Some empires threatened to cut ties. Others whispered of betrayal. But at the same time, smaller worlds and weaker races began to look to Daniel with quiet hope. They saw in him not a threat but a shield. They believed that if anyone could stand against the darkness, it was humanity. Meanwhile, the Eternity's Light grew stronger each day. Systems long dormant were reactivated. Weapons gleamed with light. Shields shimmered with renewed strength, and engines pulsed with deep power. Daniel spent hours guiding the crew that had awakened, training them, preparing them for what lay ahead. Claire watched in awe as men and women who had slept for 20,000 years adjusted quickly, their eyes sharp, their voices filled with discipline. They trusted Daniel completely, following his every order without hesitation. One night, Daniel brought Claire to the deepest chamber of the ship. Inside was a great map, a star chart older than any in the galaxy. It showed the locations of other seed ships, hidden across the stars. Many, Daniel admitted, might have been lost, but some could still endure. Claire's breath caught as she realized what this meant. Humanity's return was not limited to the Eternity's Light. Others could awaken, bringing fleets, knowledge, and people back into the galaxy, but the enemy was not silent. Soon after the colony battle, more attacks came. Worlds on the edge of space were stripped bare. Entire populations vanished. Survivors spoke of ships that moved like shadows, draining life from everything they touched. Panic spread. Fleets tried to defend, but they were torn apart. The council could no longer deny the truth. Daniel's warning had been real. The council called again for unity. But mistrust between empires ran too deep. Some accused others of weakness. Some accused humans of bringing chaos. Daniel listened but did not waste his voice on endless arguments. Instead, he prepared. The Eternity's light was not meant to sit in council chambers. It was meant to fight. Captain Arian, once cautious, began to stand more openly at Daniel's side. He had seen the battle, seen how the human ship moved with deadly precision. He told the council that if they ignored Daniel, they were fools. He argued that the galaxy had no other choice. Many still resisted, but slowly voices began to change. The fear of the enemy was greater than their fear of humanity. When the next distress call came, the council hesitated, but Daniel did not. He set course without waiting for permission. Claire stood beside him, watching the stars stretch before them. The ship glided forward with silent grace, and the fleets that had once doubted now followed behind. Not out of trust, but out of need. They could not face the darkness alone. The second great battle began above a world called Illyra. The enemy came in numbers greater than before, their ships swarming like insects, their weapons tearing into defenses. The council fleets fought bravely but began to crumble. Then the Eternity's light descended into the battle. Its weapons roared, its shields flared, and under Daniel's command it struck with the strength of an ancient predator. Claire watched in awe as Daniel guided the ship. Every move seemed perfect, every strike precise. His crew, though newly awakened, fought as if they had never slept. The enemy recoiled, ships burning in their wake. But the cost was high. Many council ships fell, their crews lost. The planet's surface shook as fire rained from the sky. And yet in the heart of chaos, the humans stood unbroken. When the battle ended, the enemy withdrew again, but not in defeat. Their retreat was measured as if they were testing, learning. Daniel knew it was only the beginning. He told Claire that the true storm was still coming. After the battle, the council could no longer deny humanity. Their whispers turned into grudging respect. Some even began to call Daniel a commander not just of his own people, but of all who wished to survive. Yet behind their words, fear still lingered. For if humanity could wield such strength after 20,000 years of silence, what would they become once fully awake? On the observation deck, Claire asked Daniel what he felt in that moment. He looked out at the stars, his face unreadable. He said humanity had been given a second chance. They had been silent for so long, but now their voices would be heard again. The question was whether the galaxy would listen, or whether it would break under the weight of what was to come. The Eternity's light drifted through the stars, no longer just a ghost ship, but a beacon. Behind it, fleets gathered. Ahead, the enemy waited. And in that space between hope and fear, humanity's return became the greatest story the galaxy had ever known. The Eternity's light moved through the stars with quiet strength. Once it had been forgotten, a silent relic drifting in the dark. Now it was awake, alive, and followed by fleets of aliens who once doubted but now clung to its shadow. Across the galaxy, stories spread of the ghost ship and its human commander, Daniel Brooks. The myths had become reality, and reality was even more terrifying and inspiring than the old tales. On board, the mood was both heavy and determined. The crew members who had been awakened from their long sleep trained each day. They moved through the corridors with discipline, adjusting to a galaxy that had changed while they slept. Their loyalty to Daniel never wavered. To them, he was not just their commander, but the man who had carried their hope across 20,000 years. Claire Morgan often walked among them, recording their stories, learning their thoughts. She was amazed at how quickly they adapted, their minds sharp and their spirits steady. Yet even as the ship grew stronger, so did the enemy. Reports came from distant sectors, colonies stripped bare, patrols vanishing, entire worlds falling silent. Survivors described the same horrors Daniel had spoken of, the life drained from planets, the emptiness left behind. The council could no longer deny the truth. They called the enemy the Devourers, a name whispered with dread. And they looked more and more to Daniel for answers. The council called a grand assembly, the largest in centuries. Every empire sent their leaders. The hall was filled with voices, loud and desperate. Some demanded that humanity lead a united front. Others argued that giving the humans too much power would be dangerous. Old rivalries returned, but underneath them all was fear. Fear that no matter what they chose, the Devourers could not be stopped. Daniel stood before them, tall and calm. He did not shout, he did not beg. He simply told them the truth. Humanity had fought this enemy before and survived, though the cost had been almost too much to bear. They had chosen silence to save the galaxy, not to abandon it. Now that silence had ended and the enemy had returned, he told them plainly, they could fight together and survive, or they could fall divided and be consumed. His words struck deep. Many leaders still resisted, but others began to see that there was no choice. If the Devourers were to be stopped, humanity's knowledge and strength would be needed. Claire watched as Daniel spoke. She felt the weight of his words, the gravity of his calmness. He was not trying to be a hero, not trying to take power. He was simply telling the truth. And that truth was stronger than any speech of fire and passion. The Council, after long argument, agreed to a fragile alliance. Fleets from different empires were placed under joint command. Though tensions ran deep, the Eternity's light became the heart of this alliance. Some called it a beacon, others called it a weapon. But all agreed it was their only hope. The enemy did not wait. Soon after, scouts reported massive movement near the edge of the galaxy. Dozens of Devourer ships larger than anything yet seen were gathering. Their path was clear. They were heading toward a cluster of core worlds, worlds rich with life. If those worlds fell, the galaxy would be broken. Daniel did not hesitate. He ordered the Eternity's light forward. The Allied fleets followed, though many were afraid. Claire felt the tension as she walked through the ship. Soldiers checked their weapons, engineers secured the systems, and the awakened humans prepared in silence. No one knew if they would return. It felt as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath. The final battle began in the void between stars. The enemy came in waves, ships swarming like shadows, their weapons burning with deadly hunger. The Allied fleets fought bravely, but they were overwhelmed. One by one, their lines broke. Fear spread through their comms. Claire listened, her heart sinking, until Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. Calm, steady, unshaken, he gave orders, guiding the fleets, pulling them back into formation, directing their fire with precision. Slowly, the panic eased. Slowly, they began to fight as one. The Eternity's light struck like a sword. Its weapons burned through the enemy. Its shields flared against their attacks. Daniel stood tall on the command deck, his eyes never leaving the battle. His crew moved with perfect discipline, every action sharp and exact. The ship was not just a vessel. It was a symbol, a reminder that humanity had faced this darkness before and would not bow. But the enemy was vast. More ships poured in, larger and stronger. The Allied fleets began to falter again. Explosions lit the dark, screams filled the comms. Claire gripped the edge of her seat, watching as hope seemed to fade. Then Daniel gave an order that stunned her. He commanded the Eternity's light to dive deep into the heart of the enemy fleet. The ship roared forward, shields blazing, weapons striking in all directions. Enemy ships broke around it, some destroyed, others fleeing its fury. At the center of the swarm, the largest Devourer ship loomed, a massive creature of metal and hunger. Daniel ordered every weapon fired. The Eternity's light unleashed its full power, beams of energy tearing into the giant until it cracked apart in a storm of fire. The explosion rippled through the enemy fleet. For the first time, the Devourers faltered. The Allied fleets saw it and rallied. With renewed strength, they pressed forward. Ship by ship, the enemy began to fall back. The void filled with burning wreckage, the screams of victory rising. The battle lasted for hours, but in the end, the enemy retreated into the dark. Not destroyed, not gone, but beaten. For now. When silence fell, the survivors cheered. The Allied fleets had endured. The core worlds were safe. The Devourers had been stopped, though everyone knew it was only the beginning. Claire stood beside Daniel, her heart full. She told him he had saved them all. Daniel shook his head. He said it was not him alone. It was humanity. It was the Alliance. It was everyone who had chosen to fight instead of surrender. In the days that followed, the galaxy changed. The Council, though still divided, began to see the value of unity. Fleets trained together, knowledge was shared, and for the first time in centuries, empires worked side by side. And at the center of it all was the Eternity's light, no longer a ghost ship, but a living symbol of hope. Daniel walked often among his sleeping crew, touching the glass of their chambers. He knew their time was coming soon. More would be awakened, more voices added to humanity's return. He told Claire that the silence of 20,000 years had ended forever. Humanity was back, and with them the galaxy had a chance. Claire wrote in her journal that night. She wrote of the battles, the fear, the hope. She wrote of Daniel, the commander who carried the weight of the past and the burden of the future. And she wrote of the galaxy itself, trembling on the edge of war but no longer alone, for humanity had returned, and with them came a promise. They would not be silent again. The stars stretched endless before them, filled with danger and promise. The eternity's light moved forward, leading the way, and across the galaxy, from the smallest colony to the greatest empire, one truth was whispered again and again. Humanity had been gone for 20,000 years, but now they had returned and the galaxy would never be the same.